why I'm thinking these new HO scale locomotives from Athearn Genesis are so awesome, coming up right now on the main track. Hey friends, my name is Mike. Welcome back to the main track. It's great to have you on board as always today. In my last episode, I showed you some new crossing signals I'm installing on my layout, and I had some trains running around, and with those you might have caught a glimpse of something new here on the layout. They're my brand new Athearn Genesis GP38-2s painted in the NKT scheme. They came out a few weeks ago, and I tell you, I'm really loving these locomotives so far. I wanted to take this episode to highlight some of the things that make these so excellent and why I'm really enjoying having these on the layout. Now, Katy modelers, including myself, have been anticipating these units for a few months now, ever since they were announced by Athearn. So they finally got to me a few weeks ago, and I've had a chance to break them in, and I wanted to give you a quick rundown of these. But first of all, I wanted to give you a big thank you for subscribing to our channel, and also give a shout out to our brand new Patreon friends. They've decided to partner with us every single month to keep this content coming. I've got more details about that program in the description below. Now, getting started here, Athearn has been producing these GP38-2s in various railroad road names for a few years now, and there's a ton of reviews online for those, highlighting how they run and their quality, all that good stuff. So I don't want to rehash what's already out there. I'm just going to touch on some of the things that make these Katy units stand out. Well, a quick background on the prototype. The Katy had 18 of these GP38-2s on its roster, and all of them were delivered in 3 batches in the 1970s. Now, the units I have here represent 2 variations. Number 320 has dynamic brakes, and 313, as you can see, does not have that feature. Now, up until the mid to late 1970s, most of Katy's new engines were ordered without dynamic brakes, but the 3rd batch of these GP38-2s that arrived on the property in 1976 had dynamic brakes, and the plan was to use these as pool power on Burlington Northern coal trains operating from the mines out west to power plants on the Katy system. Well, the BN basically told Katy these smaller 4-axle units weren't going to cut it, and so that's when MKT ordered 6-axle SD40-2s for working with BN's 6-axle units. And at that point, these GP38-2s were relegated to general freight service, and they are perfectly suited for that. Now, as for the models, Athearn released these Genesis units in December of 2022 in 3 different road numbers. And as I mentioned in one of my previous episodes, this is actually the 2nd run of these GP38-2s that Athearn has released. And the first one, which was a handful of years ago, wasn't exactly received well by Katy modelers because, as you can see right here, the color was kind of strange. Certainly not prototypical. It was almost a fluorescent lime color. But as you can see, this latest run has a color that's very close to being right on. Some of our fellow Katy modelers and experts worked very closely with Athearn to get this run correct, and of course we appreciate all of their hard work. Now, as you can see here, the green and yellow paint and lettering on these units is very nice and crisp. The shade matches Athearn's first run of the Genesis NKT GP39-2s, so it's very nice to have all of our locomotives matching here. Now, whether it's firing these things up or running them across the layout, they sound very nice with the Tsunami 2 DCC decoders. And the LED lighting from the headlights to the strobe on top, you can see they're very nice and bright. Well, as you can see here, from top to bottom and front to back, the details are very good. There's very nice handrails, which are typical of Athearn Genesis units, and because of that, they're actually on the very delicate side, so you have to be very careful when handling these. Now, other nice items you're going to find on these Athearn Genesis units include prototypical underbody details, a cab interior, and see-through fans on top. Now, 313 and 320 include a feature seen on some Katy units during the latter years of the railroad, and that's these yellow safety stripes along the sill. A 318 represents engines that did not have those. Now, with these two locomotives side by side, you're able to see a variation between the Katy paint schemes. With the MKT units that did not have dynamic brakes, the road number was placed on the long hood right at the top right there, pretty much above the K in the MKT. However, as with number 320, you can see on locomotives that have dynamic brakes, the dynamic brake blister is right there at the top of the long hood, so of course there's no way to put the road number in that spot. In those cases, you can see right here where they placed the number, right on the cab underneath the windows. The yellow striping was interrupted for this green background, and those yellow numbers were placed right in that area. I always thought this difference was pretty interesting among the locomotives, and it certainly mixed things up and provided some nice variation of the engines there on the Katy roster. Well, as I've mentioned, I really love these new GP38-2s. I think they're awesome, but there are a couple of very minor issues I noticed when I received these. Now, along the lines of handrails for both units, some of those had burrs along the way that were part of the manufacturing process, and they weren't smooth, and I was able to fix those, thankfully, pretty easily with an X-Acto knife. And on number 313, one of my CV settings was a little off, and that's for the strobe light on top. Now, for most DCC decoders, function 5 controls that strobe light on top, turns it off and on, but for some reason on this locomotive, it was set to number 6, so it must have been programmed that way in the factory. I can easily change that by going back into the settings for the programming. I've heard some other modelers saying they got number 313 and had that same exact issue. So once again, something that's an easy fix, but just giving you a heads up. Now, as for that light itself, it flashes in a pattern closer to what you would have seen on a locomotive rotary beacon, where it should be a strobe light. But once again, I can go into the CV settings and fix that. And those are really the only two small issues I can find here with these Athearn Genesis GP38-2s. In one of my previous episodes, I showed you a Southern Pacific GP38-2 I had, so pretty much identical to these. I really liked that one, and so I was super excited to get these MKT ones here on the layout. So far, I purchased all three numbers that Athearn Genesis has released with this latest run of the MKT GP38-2. I don't plan on modeling all 18 of this model that the Katy had on its locomotive roster, but I do anticipate purchasing some other ones and renumbering those so I have plenty of them to pull my trains here on the Sedalia subdivision layout. What are your thoughts on Athearn Genesis products? Do you have any of these GP38-2s in any road name? Or maybe some other models? I'd like to hear from you. Leave a comment below and I'll look forward to reading those. We'll see you next time right here on the main track.